We're back.
I know, you've been waiting all day for this. We decided we're not going to do it. No, just kidding. So, here's the thing. Now that we've gotten through so much on desired state configuration, this is one of these magical moments that...
We should refresh the beginning. What do we say it was? Distributed.
Oh, yeah.
Heterogeneous configuration management platform. So we've talked about distributed. We've talked about configuration management. We've illustrated a bunch of the platform components. We just have one adjective to go. Heterogeneous.
And this is where people, just in general, are amazed. So let's show you the slides of where we're at and what we're going to do, just so we keep everything nice and clean. We are in Module 7, the last module for today, and we're going to start working cross-platform. And we've got some super secret stuff that we haven't even told you about yet. Plus, there we go, right into the module. What are we going to do? The importance of cross-platform. You already know the importance of cross-platform. We're going to take a look at the requirements for setting up... Oh, yeah, baby. Communications with Linux so that we can do this. Something called an OMI server. OMI?
Oh, my.
Oh, my. Yeah, like you've never had that joke before. And writing a configuration for Linux. Show you some of the resources that are available. And then we want to carve out some extra time to show you something special.
Hot off the presses.
Hot. Really hot off the presses, so don't miss this. So first thing, importance of cross-platform. We already know this. Our businesses are, they use a variety of things in their environment.
Yep.
And both in the business.
Can I tell it this way?
Yeah.
Because it's really simple. Some people think, oh, you know, what's going on with Microsoft and Linux? Is this some sort of a ploy? Look, let's be really clear. Azure is one of the most important things we're doing. And here's the thing you need to understand. In the context of Azure, we make more money if someone's using 10 instances of Linux than if they're using 2 instances of Windows. In the context of Azure, it's pure volume. So what we need to do is to help people consume as much computing as they want, whether it's Windows or Linux. So it is not a checkbox for us. Linux is not a checkbox. It is a business imperative that we provide great support for Linux. So that's why we're doing it.
And it's amazing to a lot of people, but tout the message. It is for your business. It is for what your business needs. It's working with your business because your business matters. Your customers matter. And yes, as a long-term IT guy, it surprised the darn out of me too with Microsoft, but it's all about cross-platform, baby. Just hug it out. We'll all get along. Unix and Windows guys, you know, hugging each other, it's a good thing.
That's now, PowerShell is the sea that refuses no river.
That was a moment. That was a moment right there. So let's dive into the slide. I want to talk about the requirements for Linux. First of all, I'm going to do this by thanking a couple of amazing people out there. When you're working with Linux, we're going to work with CentOS 6. But for information on Ubuntu and Oracle, first of all, I want to point out that a lot of the information that I've cobbled together for this demonstration came from Michael Green and Rivi did a great article on PowerShell magazine. They deserve a tremendous amount of credit and expertise. First of all,
yeah, these guys are rock stars.
Absolute. So if you're, looking at this for the first time and trying to get your feet wet with this, I just want to kind of bring this up really quick. I don't know if this is going to work or not because we'll find out. And see if this will come up. Here's the DSC for Linux step by step, and this is the code that I've already given you. And
Control Plus.
Control Plus. Oh yeah, Control Plus. See, I'm cross-platform. I'm not used to that technology. And so it goes through all the prereqs for it, and actually Jeffrey's going to help talk about some of these things as we go through them, the requirements that you have to have, and then he has a great walkthrough. And this is the walkthrough that I've already included for you with the scripts that we're going to pop in and use. Also, I want to point out this article. Oops, I lost control of my slide. Rivi's got this great article at PowerShellMagazine.com. Another great resource all the way around. Installing and configuring DSC for Linux. After you've done it once with like the CentOS, or watched us do it here, this will really help you with working with other versions of Linux. So he's got CentOS and Ubuntu, the packages, what you want to build. It gives you a lot of information on putting this together. So big shout out and kudos to those guys for all of their hard work.
And it is important to note that at the current stage, this is done as an open source project. So you're free to grab the code, make contributions, etc. But it also means that you often have to build your own product. So your own binaries. So that'll get addressed at some point. But at this point, it's an open source project.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to take you through this, grabbing the components and then building this and I've got the slide up for it, building an OMI server and the LCM on the Linux side so that we can have communication. Remember, it's all about WMI and SIM, and we want to use SIM for the connection, getting across. If we can get that connection, then life is good, and that's what we're going to do. So let's dive right in.
Hoo-ha.
Oops. Hoo-ha. Wait a minute. Let me dive right in. And the first thing I'm going to do is you can download this open source. You can download resources for Unix, basically NX. And I'm going to copy these resources. I want to show you guys something. I'm copying them to the place that most of you would say you're not supposed to be copying stuff there. And I am, because there was a small bug at the time when I had gotten these that it didn't like the new module path. So I'm putting in the old module path. I think that's been fixed, but just in case, we're going to put it in the old module path, and then I'm going to show you what's changed about my resources. Whoops, hit the wrong key. There we go. And I'm going to do a get DSC resource. So get DSC resource, and I'm going to show you some of the resources that have been added so that we can work with Unix. Let me scroll up here towards the top, and you will see them. I've got an NX file, package, script, service, and user resource that we can currently work with that's out there. So now I've got the resources, which is cool, but now I need to configure the box.
Yes.
Unix has to be set up for it. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a connection to, I just happen to have on my virtualized environment, PuTTY and a Linux box. So I'm going to sign in as root. I don't think I can make it bigger. Can I make this bigger? I don't think I can.
Full screen.
Let's see if I can make it bigger real quick. Appearance. Let's make it bigger. Let's make it bigger.
Oh, yeah. Look at you.
Let's make it bigger. Look at me.
I don't care what those people say about
That's
you.
right.
Okay.
I could click like anybody. You know, I'm good. So I've signed in right now. I'm going to minimize this for a second because I want to show you the script.
All that work.
And after all that work, I just minimized it. I'm going to show you the script. And guys, I'm not going to make this any more complicated than it needs to be. This is not something that you're going to run in PowerShell. That's why I wrote, don't run this in PowerShell. PowerShell's not going to recognize yum. So here we go. These are some of the prerequisite packages in the case of the CentOS. And if Jeffrey, you want to talk to this, I'm going to copy these and start running these in the...
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it is a development, it's an open source project at this point. So what he's doing here is we're installing the developer tools. Welcome to Unix.
Yeah.
And so we're installing the developer tools. You get the SSL, you get wget. And these are the things, again, we've got OMI. And then this is, to refresh your memory, DSC is an extension agent to OMI. And what we didn't discuss was actually the structure of that extension agent. So the way it works is that extension agent to OMI or WMI gets a document as to the way how the world ought to be. It's the thing that analyzes all the resources, produces the directed acyclic graph, and then navigates that graph and calls providers to make it so. Those providers can be native code WMI providers written a particular way, or they can be PowerShell providers. On Linux, you'll see right now we just have native code providers, and we have a relatively small set. It turns out that on Unix, you don't need as many because so much of Unix configuration is done through configuring files themselves. So if you can do a good job configuring files, you can actually manage the bulk of Unix.
And that's one of the things I don't think Windows people need to understand a little bit more about how Linux is configured. They don't really understand that it's primarily about the configuration of files.
Yep.
And that and one of the things is I think Windows IT guys that have been primarily Windows, don't be afraid of learning a little bit about Linux and how to manage it. It's not, you're managing these files and you can still configure an IP address.
Sure.
It's not something that's completely and totally foreign because you understand the concepts. Push yourself a little bit. It's worth getting familiar with what the Linux guys do and what the Linux guys, they're certainly getting familiar with what we do.
Yep.
Okay, we just at the end of that, we finished the installation of the developer toolkit. Now I've got a couple of other things here to get installed. They'll be much quicker. I wanted you guys to be able to see the fact that this stuff is installing. I didn't want to have a black box. Let me grab the next command, and then we can get to downloading the OMI server itself. And as you can see what I'm doing, if you want to do this as well, you can install the CentOS and then set up its networking, which is pretty straightforward. And then I'm taking these lines and copying them in. Could I have written this into opened up VI in here and put it into a script? Absolutely, but that would have been cheating. So,
Why would that have been cheating?
As a matter of fact, I was just about to say that would have been smart on my part.
Yeah, we call that automation.
We call that automation, moron. That's what you.
I didn't say that word.
No, you didn't say that word, and I appreciate that. That's very nice. So we're almost there. I'm going to try not to make this too boring for you. And we're going to install wget because we're going to need that as well.
Yeah, the nice thing about this, Linux is almost as nice as PowerShell now, in that they have something like PowerShell get. The Linux community has had that for quite a long time.
Yeah, and there's
they have a very good tool chain. They've got a very good set of tools, and all kidding aside, we owe the Linux community a debt of gratitude. We've always been very clear about that. In many ways, we think we've gone beyond some of the things that have done in Linux, but we always think the world of them.
Absolutely, and I'm sure there's some Linux guy that when you said that just did a spit take when you.
Oh no! You search Jeffrey Snover and Unix. I have a very consistent view of this. Oh.
Yeah, you do. You really do.
Yeah.
So
I'm a long-time Linux guy, so Unix guy.
Absolutely.
It wasn't Linux back then.
Okie dokie. So now we're up to building, configuring and building the OMI server, and we'll make this real quick.
Well, you're building this from the atoms on up, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is definitely something that everybody's going to want to script after they've run through it.
Never watched Julia Child, huh?
Never. Oh yeah, pull it out of the oven.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that, and then I realized that I wanted you to have a chance to talk about it, and I figured I'd just.
I'm supposed to be talking. Okay, well listen. Here, you keep going. I'm going to talk. So again, let's refresh why Linux is so important to Microsoft. So I talked about Azure in the context of the tenant space. That's important. It's also important in the context of the fabric, okay? So a lot of the fabric components are Linux-based or just heterogeneous-based, right? So we want to be able to go talk to something no matter what operating system's running there. And standards-based management is what allows us to do that. And so OMI, being our open source standards-based management tool, we're now extending with desired state configuration so that I can configure all elements of the data center using a uniform configuration stack, okay? Now, how important is this? Well, the Windows Server team has something called Cloud Platform Solution. The Cloud Platform Solution is a cloud in a box. So basically sort of Azure in a box. You literally buy 1 to 4 racks, and we will configure that to run a cloud, right? System Center based cloud. It's got the Azure pack.
So the Azure pack. Yeah, which I just love that. That's beautiful.
Exactly. So, but then we now have to go configure all these systems. And so the joke is that prior to the cloud performance configuration, we didn't have long installs. You had long installs, but we didn't have.
Yeah, there you go.
We didn't have a configuration management problem. You had a configuration
management.
But now, as we are building these very complex systems, so it's no longer I'm a file system developer, and so I'm going to go configure file system on this server, make sure that works. And okay, that's fine, that's happy. And I'm an IIS developer, I make sure IIS works on this system. Now all of a sudden we have a group of people who are like, wait a second, I got 4 racks of machines that all have to be done this way, and this has to be done before that, and that has to be done before that. And they come back and they're like, man, that's a hard task. It's like, yeah, my friend, it is. What do we do about that? And so we have a very strong vested interest in being able to configure everything with a uniform stack, with a nice, simple, declarative configuration management system. Now, desired state configuration was not available when we were building the cloud platform stack.
Yeah.
So we weren't able to do that. So it's all configured using PowerShell, so that's great. But we're using it as an acid test to make sure that the infrastructure and the resources are all the right resources to be able to build this.
And actually, that makes a lot of sense, taking your own code and then making the resources out of it that way.
Yeah. Called, what's that, drinking your own champagne?
Drinking your own champagne, eating your own dog food, right?
Dog food,
Eating your own
yes.
dog food, I like that. We're almost there. We're installing the DSC components that we got from GitHub, and you guys have seen the web address here. I have it in the script for you where you can get those from.
It's taken a while, so maybe we should bring out the hand puppets.
Oh, there's...
Okay.
He's been threatening me with these hand puppets.
I got Mr. Unix.
The entire
Windows.
time.
Mr. Windows wants to configure Mr. Unix. Can we talk? Yes, love.
Absolutely, and we're almost there.
Come on, dude.
It's end of the day.
I wouldn't have had to bring out the hand puppets if you had just baked this in.
Baked it in, I know. We're almost there. Almost there. This way everybody believes that it actually happened. Is that the excuse? Yeah. See? Oh, we're almost there. And I'm actually going to bring it up here in the background. This brings it up in the background. This is the OMI server that's going to come up that we're going to try to make our SIM connections to. And this is the magical point in time. We hope that it's the magical
all been
point.
leading to this.
It's all been leading to this in the setup for it. I get questions all the time about, can I do this with SIM to a Linux box? Absolutely, and now is the point. So let's see what's going to happen. Boys and girls, I gave everybody this script out here. When you get to this final step, this is running it in debugging mode. Here's how to run it in the background. And I've run it in the background. And really what I want to do is I'll come back to showing you a possible configuration script just so you can see what it looks like here in a second. But I want to show you something here really quick just so you can see that it gets applied, that it what it's going to look like. So the first thing is that we're going to want to send a username and password because the Linux box has a different one. I'm going to be using root. And I know that you might be freaking out because I've simply just put it into the script. I could have done get credential so that you couldn't have seen what the password was. But in this case, I just wanted to make it, this is the part that I automated to make easy. So I'm going to get that as a secure string. I'm going to put that into credential so that I can pass that. And here's where the magic goes. And this is the moment that I have like 2 fingers, 4 toes crossed, all of that. Take a look. I'm going to set the options. We're going to use SSL from my Windows box to the Linux box and see if we can, this is the options that we're going to use. And then here is where we're going to build a SIM session, an honest to God SIM session from a Windows box to a Linux box and see if we can get it to work by passing the credentials. So drum roll and lots of crossed fingers. And if this works, we're good. I feel so much better now.
Hoo-ha.
Hoo-ha. So I actually have a SIM I know it doesn't look all that impressive, but I have a SIM session to a Linux box. Yeah! Okay, production guy scream. Do you see what the next command is? Do you see what the next command is? I can now send it a configuration. I now can start to configure that Linux box. If the Linux box has the OMI server and the OMI server is running, you'll script that. You'll make that painless and you'll set that up for your Linux boxes. I can now connect the session to them and now I can send them configurations. It's got DSC, it's all set up, ready to go. Now, what can you do with a configuration? I have no bloody idea. Well, yeah, I do. Because look, I got lots of great ideas here because here's the thing. I know I'm writing this in PowerShell. So, okay, I can do this. I can manage a Linux box if I can write this in PowerShell. I didn't have to, once again, the promise came true. I didn't have to learn another language. I can write this in PowerShell. And all you'll see I'm doing is I'm importing the DSC resources of the module NX, and now I can start to use those resources. Now, you know what I haven't tried? IntelliSense is working for me.
This is the glory of schema and standards-based management.
I love standards-based management. So you can now start to explore these resources and see what they will do for you. Now, in this case, this is an extreme example I wanted you to have. This actually sets up a word process site.
Yeah,
So
WordPress.
WordPress, sorry.
With MySQL.
Notice, guys, MySQL. So it's going to install MySQL. That's what it's doing with the packages. If it doesn't have it, it'll set it all up for us. And we'll go down here. Apache. There's Apache. It'll take care of Apache for us. Get the SQL service all set up. So this is a very complicated configuration script, but you can see what the power of that configuration can be. Of doing it. And notice when we run it, we're going to output them off. And we just created, as soon as he runs through it, look at that. We just created our own configuration. And our configuration, again, you explore those resources, go work with it, and we can then fire it. What did I call it? Web demo apply for? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, that's why. It's over here. I got the wrong thing. We can then fire that configuration over to the Linux box and have it work. Now, one thing I do want to kind of point out here is, and just for everyone, just so you know, just so I can get this actually on tape. I remember, the first time I saw this, was at a PowerShell Summit in North America. I think it was last year's. You came in and said, I want to show something cool. And of course, we there at PowerShell.org, we're like, well, D.E. Snover gets to do whatever he wants, so let him do. And he did this. He showed this Linux setup. Only his was fully automated, so it was quicker. And he showed the connection to Linux and managing Linux, and everybody's kind of like, what? I mean, it took a minute for it to sink in that we just, from Windows, talked to Linux and managed it with DSC.
Yeah.
I mean, but guys, I want you to also keep something in mind. That wasn't a year ago. And so it's come a long way really fast. So very impressive. Can you manage Linux with DSC? Yep.
And I'll tell you, there's a lot more going on that I'm not telling you about now, but I'm telling you, we're being very serious about providing great support for Linux.
That's awesome. So you've got everything for we hear applause in the back. Everybody applaud, because now it's time. Cross-platform is more than just being able to talk to a Linux box, right?
It is.
Why do we care about things other than Linux box? We got Windows, we got Linux. We're good.
Cloud Platform Solution. As we do Cloud Platform Solution, I have to manage, I'm in charge of everything. I got to manage the raw devices. I got to manage the storage. I got to manage the networking.
So all of the infrastructure, the networking stuff, those lower layers, all have to get managed. So you're talking about the networking stuff, the storage devices. That's actually a lot of stuff. Now, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You got to stop for a second, because those aren't how we don't think of those as computers. Those aren't running Windows. They're not running Linux.
Correct.
How are we going to talk to them?
Well, some of them run
DSC?
Linux. Some of them, the answer is, who cares what they run? Many of them are running Linux.
Okay, great. I like that. Who cares what they run? How are we going to talk to them, though? We got PowerShell. We got DSC.
Standards-based management.
Standards-based management. I love that answer.
Yeah.
I love
You ever
that.
tried to manage a Tor?
Manage a tour?
Tor. T-O-R. Top of rack switch. A network device. It's like,
Back switch.
I
thought he was talking about like being a roadie on a music tour, because we did the whole bringing the band back together. So, okay.
Yeah,
I'll shut up now.
into my Richard Sidaway voice.
Tour. Tour. Yeah, because he doesn't
Ever
speak
managed a
English.
tour?
He never speaks English. A top of the rack device. Okay.
Yeah.
Great example.
Network device.
Yeah.
Pretty complicated. Pretty and then I do what? And then I do
There's
what?
like separate guys for that or
exactly.
something. But I've got like 1,000 of them now, and I can't send these guys running around all the place.
Yep. And very easy to make mistakes.
Very easy for humans to make
But
mistakes.
guess what? when you make a mistake on your network, you're going to have a bad day.
You're going to have a very bad day. It's never a minor mistake. So are you insinuating that...
By the way, if you actually read this, so if you take a look at all the major cloud providers, things go wrong. And when they go wrong, they are now very frequently very public about what went wrong. They tell people, look, here's what happened, and here's what we did, and here's the root cause, etc. And some very large number of them have to do with configuration errors, and a very large number of them have to do with configuration errors of networking devices, and a very large number of them have to do with humans making configuration errors on network devices.
And there was... Just to your point, there was a major outage that was occurred by a human making a mistake on a storage configuration that caused a big, that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
A human making a mistake. And I don't know about you, but on the best of days, when there's an emergency or something is wrong, I'm pretty guaranteed to make a boo-boo and make a mistake. So if I can have a system take care of itself without me, that's going to be good in the long run. So
yeah, exactly. We just be clear. We love humans, but we want them serving us beer, not configuring our network.
and also you solving the business problems.
Oh yeah,
those two. Because now you can focus on the business problems that are there to create more agility to the business and not running around with
solving
your hair.
the business problem, not causing the business.
Yeah, not causing the business problems, not running around with your hair on fire. You can see that's happened to me a lot. So this works out much better for everybody. So you're basically saying that we can now manage things like top of the rack switches with DSC because of the standards based.
Yeah.
Just what we did with the Linux box. We can talk. Are we going to talk, through OMI to these switches?
Yep.
Now, what do my switches have to have in order for this to be? Is this?
They have to implement the standards.
So
they have to implement the standards, they have to implement the desired state configuration protocol, and that's it. And then again, we're providing open source software to help them do that. So maybe we should roll?
Yeah, now note to production. I don't have a slide for this because this is latest, greatest, and just brand new, hot off the shelves for you. And so what we have is, I don't have any of the top of the rack switches here for us to be able to configure, but Jeffrey has brought along a video of the configuration. So we're going to take a short 8-minute interlude so you can see these switches getting configured using DSC.
As part of this demo, we are going to see how can you leverage desired state configuration to configure a network switch in a data center. Traditionally, the network switches are configured using vendor proprietary CLI commands using an SSH protocol. This mechanism is prone to a lot of errors, and a single manual error on an data center operator can bring an entire data center down. So as part of this demo, we will see how you can author a DSC document and then push that document onto the network switch to configure various properties of the network switch. So we have used a Dell Force 10 network switch, which is configured in the lab. The IP address is 10.199.236.49. I'll quickly show you the configurations of the network switch that we have. So this is an SSH session to the network switch so that we can quickly look at the configuration of the network switch there. So if we see all of the interfaces, so as you can see, we have the 10 gigabit 0/12 to 0/17 connected to various hosts in the data center, and all of them are currently up. Now let us quickly look at the configuration of the Ethernet interface itself. So let us enter the config mode of the switch and then onto the interface configuration, and we'll quickly look at the config of the switch. So as you can see, it is currently configured as layer 2 and there is no IP address associated with the Ethernet port. Now let us move quickly to the DSC document. This is an example of a DSC document, and what we want to do is we want to configure the Ethernet port that we just saw some time back to layer 3, and we will associate an IP address with it. So as you can see, this is the configuration that I have, and then I have a configuration element which represents an Ethernet port, and I'll call it the Ethernet port 12. It is identified by a key which is 10 gig 0/12, which is the unique identifier for our interface 12. We will set the enabled state of that port to enabled, and then we'll set the port mode of the Ethernet port to layer 3. And then we would also associate an IP address with that port. And currently it is being identified by an IP interface which has an IP address of 192.168.0.100, and we'll have a network prefix set to 24. Now, since currently it is configured as layer 2 with no IP address configured, I also have a session to another host which is currently connected to the switch on a downlink port, and we'll look at the session that I have configured on the machine, which is the machine MSPSM04. And as you can see, this is a computer or a host which is connected to the downlink of the switch, and the name is MSPSM04. And currently, since there is no IP address configured, if we want to issue a ping command to that IP address from the host, we will see that the ping command will fail. Now what we would do is we will apply this DSC document onto the network switch. So we'll quickly compile this document. So we push the output of the compiled document into C drive Ethernet port viewmorph. Let's quickly look at what gets written onto the folder. So let's open this, and as you can see, this is the morph file that is getting generated on the local machine, which has all of the properties represented in the document in the machine readable format. So here, as you can see, I'm currently trying to set the IP address to 192.168.0.100, and it is being identified by the Ethernet port with port ID 10 gig 0/12. Let us quickly start the DSC configuration. So now the DSC configuration has been successfully applied onto the network switch, and now let us look at the configuration of the interface on the network switch. So if we run the show config command on the Ethernet port that we just configured, as you can see earlier, we did not have any IP address configured on the network switch, and now the IP address that we wanted to configure on the Ethernet port has been configured, and it is already in the layer 3 port mode. Now we can quickly check by pinging the switch from the connected host to see if that IP is actually active. So we will issue a ping command from the MSPSM04 session, and as you can see, now we are getting a reply back on the interface. So this essentially demonstrates how a DSC document can be used to configure the network switch. And now we'll also look at another mechanism of the desired state configuration, which is automatic drift detection and auto correction. So here, since we configured the network switch with the IP address 192.168.0.100, someone can come into the network switch and then can change the settings, which can create a lot of problems in the data center. So let us try to simulate that. So we'll change the IP address of this to maybe a different value. So let's put, and now since we changed the IP address of the network switch, we will see that the ping commands will stop responding. So right now the destination host is unreachable because we changed the IP address. Now after a specific interval of time, when the DSC engine on the network switch sees that there is a drift from the expected IP address, it will trigger in, and it's going to autocorrect the IP address back to its original value. So if we wait for a couple of minutes, we will see that the network switch has been restored back to its state. So let's try and ping the network switch now to see if indeed the autocorrection worked. So now the IP address of the network switch is, as you can see, it's responding back to the ping messages, and it has been autocorrected. We'll also quickly look at the configuration just to validate this. So if you see, we have the IP address again configured to 192.168.0.100. Now again, since we configured the Ethernet port to layer 3, we can actually also revert it back to the layer 2. So the following configuration document here is pretty straightforward, and what it does is it again identifies the port ID 10 gig 0/12, and then it changes the port mode to L2. So let us apply this configuration back. And again, we'll start the DSC configuration on the network switch. And now, as you can see, the document has successfully completed on the switch. And we'll also look at the configuration of the port again. And now there is no IP address and it's back to the layer 2 port mode. And just to validate that the ping should now fail. So now if we try to ping to the address that we configured earlier, the pings have again started failing. Thank you.
And we're back. It was kind of a weird kind of thing for us because we weren't sure when it was going to come back. I mean, we were watching, but we can't hear anything in here. So, but we're back. What do you think of the switch? Isn't that cool? So, not only can you use DSC for, oh, I got a thumbs up. Not only can you use DSC for Windows, both domain joined, not domain joined. Not only can you use DSC for Linux, but now we got switches. The word node, you know, I asked Jeffrey once, why wasn't the word node just called computer name? And it's like, not everything in the world is a computer. So node means node. It could be whatever it needs to be. And I think that's awesome. So what do you think? How do you think we did today?
Pretty awesome.
We covered so much stuff today that brains could be melting a little bit.
Mine's melting a little.
Yeah, dribble down. So we talked about Yeah, thank you. Another effect. We talked about configuration management. We went through getting a setup for it. You need PowerShell v4 at the very minimum. You can get WMF5, the February release, which is what we've been using in here. We've got all the demos and all the scripts and all the slides for you. You need Windows remoting enabled for this. You need script execution enabled for this. And now it's time to go start building configurations and trying it out. We talked about push.
Yep, push.
Pull. We talked about the good kind of pull. And no, we talked about the good kind of pull, the HTTPS pull, setting up a secured pull. We configured the LCM. We configured configurations. We've done a lot of stuff. Some of it got pretty thick and chewy. Parameterization. So there's a lot of stuff in this particular MVA, and all of it, I'm so glad we had the opportunity to be able to share with you and help you. It's been, if you've tried to been figuring this stuff out on your own, it's probably been a very challenging task. Hoping that this MVA will provide the help that you need to get started working with desired state configuration. Now,
by the way you make this real is you take the slides, right? You take the slides, you take the scripts, and you start working them. Nothing's going to substitute for trying this, seeing something. Oh, what happens when I do that? What happens when I do this? Just use it. And then say, oh, okay, now how do I take it to that next level? Well, you talked about that parameterization. How would that work? Oh, and you talked about the configuration file. Try it. And share. Write these configurations, write these providers. Well, tomorrow we're going to talk to you about how to write providers. But your configurations and your lessons, what didn't work, what did work, share. We're all learning this stuff. As I mentioned to you, a lot of what's happening in the WMFs are coming from you. You're telling us, hey, I didn't understand that. Or, hey, what about this? We got a great suggestion here today. And I went and in the background talked to the development team, and they said, yeah, let's put that on the list of things to do. So we are very actively listening. Look, you got to use this technology. Tell us what you want.
Don't try to do this in a dark room by yourself, because you've got plenty of community support. There's some brilliant people out there that are willing to help you. So go to PowerShell.org. There's a forums for DSC-specific questions. Yep. Dave Wyatt and Steve Morosky and so many other people have been spending so much of their time just to try to help people. So please ask questions, but also when you know the answer, come back and help somebody else. And as you've seen here with the way that we've worked today, Jeffrey would help me. Here's an expert helping me get it, and I would start to play. Learning will occur, but work with other people and work inside of the community. You've got a powerful community. Now, on behalf of everybody here at the Microsoft Virtual Academy, we certainly appreciate the time that you've taken, and we want to thank all of our viewers. I think all of us would like to thank you, sir, for taking a very long day and working with us and helping us with DSC. Thank you so much. Before you leave from watching all these videos. Make sure you go out and take the poll. And I want to just say, on the behalf of Microsoft, the MVA, and on myself, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day, and best of luck with DSC. Stay in touch.